How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 2 of What If Deku Turned into a Nomu. And now, let's begin. As All Might's eyes would lay down right onto Izuku, he would have memories flood back into his mind. Izuku, you're my son, All Might would say, realizing who Izuku was, as Izuku would just laugh. Oh, you finally got it through your big-headed skull of yours. Can't believe your thick skull managed to realize that I'm your son. Could you really just not realize your son, the son of the #1 hero, just happened to become a villain? Could you really just not think that was possible, could you? Izuku would ask as All Might would stare on towards him before rushing off, jumping at Izuku before throwing a punch that would land directly to Izuku's chest. However, nothing would happen. As Izuku would only smile on towards All Might, he would punch him square across the face, sending him flying across the USJ, flying into the same set of stairs that he had once been standing on. All Might would barely be able to pull himself out of the rubble, staring on at his son, just in complete shock. He hasn't seen him in over 10 years, and he's changed so much. A young, quirkless boy is now turned into a monster. He still looked like the same Izuku he had seen all those years ago. However, scars littered his body now. Izuku would create a portal as his entire body would suddenly turn into some weird sort of person, kind of mimicking the look of Kurogiri. As he'd open a portal, he'd fall right through it. As soon as he stopped using his portal quirk, he'd turn right back into his normal self, before throwing a punch directly at All Might. So All Might would barely be able to dodge such a punch. Izuku would twist his body before throwing a thunderbolt, landing it directly in All Might's weak spot. All for One told me about your weak spot, father. Don't think I'm not gonna use it against you. I'm not gonna play by the rules with you, he would say as All Might would jump into action, still in extreme pain, both emotionally and physically. His own son was now fighting him in basically a life-or-death scenario, and now he was going to have to make the choice whether to die or have his son die. It was such a hard decision that just was wrapped up in his mind constantly, all while he was fighting his son, trying to maintain his life, that too. As Izuku would keep on throwing punches, All Might would try to match them, either blocking them or catching the punches. As Izuku would keep on going relentlessly, going on as Shigaraki would just be watching in amazement. However, from behind, Izuku would see in the corner of his eye someone sneaking up on Shigaraki as he would jump back, not being able to use any of his other quirks while in his portal mode, throwing a or just creating a portal right under Shigaraki, as Shigaraki would fall through the portal now at the just villain hideout, as he would slam his hands down onto the table, saying, "No! Damn it! Why did Izuku send me back here? The fight was just about to get interesting," he would yell to himself as All for One would start talking over the TV. "I have a feeling he sent you back here because someone was about to attack you from the behind. Izuku wouldn't want for you to not to see the show. I've seen him grow up here. I know what he'd want," All for One would say, as we now cut back to the fight, as Izuku would continue on beating on All Might, as all of a sudden Izuku would see sparks flying out of the corner of his eye again, as Bakugo Katsuki would come out of nowhere, slamming an explosion right down into Izuku. However, it did nothing at all, as Izuku would twist his head back, as Bakugo would be looking on in shock, just wondering how could this wasn't Izuku, at least not the one he had known when he was 4. There was no chance someone who was quirkless could take something like this, as Izuku's body entirely would twist, as Izuku would grab the neck of Bakugo, slamming him into All Might, as both of them would be sent flying back due to the kick of Izuku right after slamming them both into each other. As both of them would be sent flying back, All Might would stand up yelling that Bakugo needs to get everyone out of here. This isn't his fight, and even if it was, he would surely die at the end of it. All Might would say as Bakugo tell him he just couldn't leave him here. "I can't leave you here, All Might. You're going to die," Bakugo would say as All Might would stare down with a cold gaze on towards Bakugo. "Very well. Just get everyone out of here," he yelled furiously as He would have shivers down his spine. All Might now seemed like it was a life or death scenario, and he wasn't having anything else. As All Might would go for another punch, this time at full power, yelling. He was going 100% plus ultra, just trying to manage to even scratch Izuku. However, it just wasn't the case, as every punch nothing would happen, as Izuku would keep on taking the punches, tanking them, as nothing would end up working. As Izuku would jump back, sending piles of thunderbolts flying on towards All Might, as they would all strike him, electrocuting him, making him weaker and weaker and weaker. Izuku was only toying with All Might. If he wanted, he could have just sent one massive thunderbolt, killing All Might and the rest of the people in there with it in one go. However, he didn't want to do that. Something within him was holding him back from doing so. As Izuku would continue on toying with All Might, Bakugo would end up meeting up with Todoroki. Bakugo would suddenly have a realization, knowing what had been happening with these heroes now, having seen All Might in a life or death mode, as he would finally tell Todoroki if they were going to beat Izuku, it was going to be together. As Shoto Todoroki would look on before nodding his head as they would start to come up with a plan. So all of a sudden they would see the flailing body of All Might be sent flying overhead of them, as Todoroki would look on in shock. How are we gonna beat that? He'd yell. However, all of a sudden, tons more heroes would arrive on the scene. However, Izuku would grab a thunderbolt, not having it, yelling for all of them to stay back, would throw it right at them, scattering them instantly, sending them flying backwards, as many of them would hit their heads on stones or just not being knocked out from the electrocution overall. Izuku didn't kill them, though. The thunderbolt wasn't as powerful as it could have been. Again, something was holding Izuku back from killing them, and Izuku didn't even realize it. As All Might would and look up as all of the reinforcements that had arrived had been decimated, all gone within an instant, as Bakugo would jump in, throwing an explosion at Izuku, his most powerful explosion. It would burn Izuku's body on one of his arms. However, it would instantly regrow within an instant. So Bakugo would look on in shock, just wondering, how are we supposed to beat this thing? He would yell, throwing two more punches down at Izuku with explosions. However, they weren't going to do anything, as Izuku would uppercut Bakugo with both of his fists before jumping up towards the Bakugo who was in the air, slamming his fists down into Bakugo's head, sending him flying back down. As Bakugo's gaze would start to be dizzy, as he just wasn't sure what was happening, as he had just been completely dazed by how hard of Izuku's attack was. As Bakugo would look up towards the Izuku who's standing above him, All Might would jump out of nowhere, tackling Izuku, sending him flying down to the ground into some of the rubble, as Izuku would yell for All Might to let go of him, throwing his hand right into All Might's skull, repeatedly keep on punching him. However, All Might wasn't having that, as All Might would yell, "Now, Todoroki!" As Todoroki would jump out of nowhere, as All Might would peel off, as Todoroki would slam his foot on the ground, freezing Izuku in a solid block of ice. As all of them would look on in complete shock, just wondering, is it over? So many of them would sit down, finally resting, as Izuku had completely just been frozen. All of his movements, he couldn't break out of a solid iceberg. As that's what happened, Izuku was completely stuck in the iceberg. As finally more reinforcements would end up arriving, taking all of the injured or just defeated villains back, as All Might would stare on through the iceberg at his son, just wondering what could have happened to this. What made him this way? As of this be happening, All Might knew that if they were going to end up getting him out of the ice, they would end up having to just have a quirk racing zone. And so would end up just starting to build around a cube around this ice of Izuku, having Todoroki there at all times to freeze Izuku's iceberg continuously whenever it would start melting. So once the quirkless zone was complete, they tasked Todoroki to send just fire in to melt his ice. Todoroki would be reluctant to, however, he would melt all of the ice as Alright, so, All Might, you need to go in there and place the cord-canceling handcuffs on him just in case this corkless stuff doesn't work. All Might would say, as All Might would go in there only to see Zuko was completely passed out due to the ice. As All Might would go in there, carefully placing the cord-canceling handcuffs on Izuku, as he would then pick Izuku and then putting him in the back of an armored vehicle, as it would then drive off into a very secure and remote location far away from the UA campus. Once they would stop there, All Might would get out of the truck, grabbing onto Izuku, who was still asleep, before moving him into a cord-canceling room made out of the same material that the cord-canceling handcuffs was on. As this would be happening, All Might would end up seeing just Izuku there. However, All Might was behind some glass, staring on at his only son. He just didn't get it. How could his only son become this? You would think, as he would be just looking directly on at Izuku, just completely confused and conflicted. He would bring Inko there to see their son, hoping that Inko would hopefully just get a feeling that finally she gets to see her son after so long. Calling her, as he would then drive out to this remote location, which just happened to be a block, the same corkless block, basically, that they had made around Izuku in the USJ, and it was in the middle of nowhere, miles away from any civilization. So even if Izuku were to escape, it was going to cause him to try to run out, and most likely die of dehydration or hunger. So with that, Izuku would be seen just in this block as Inko would end up arriving, staring on at the glass. However, she would see Izuku wake up, not being able to see them as it was only one-way glass. She would rush over to the door as Might would yell for her to stop. She would open the door before rushing to Izuku, jumping into him, saying, "Izuku, I'm so glad to see you," she would say as tears would start falling out of her eyes, as Izuku would only blankly stare at her. "I'm sorry, who are you again?" Izuku would say. However, once she would pick her head up, revealing her face, memories would come flying back, hitting Izuku in the head like a truck, as all of a sudden he would start seeing all of these just memories of this green-haired lady. However, he still didn't recognize her. He still had these memories of her, but he just didn't recognize her at all. He had this feeling he should know who she was, like he'd seen her years ago, like she had a connection with him. However, he had no clue who she was, as Inko was crying, saying that she's his mother. "Don't you know, Izuku? I'm your mom," she would say, as Izuku would only shake his head. I don't think you're my mother. You might be." "Stop playing with me," Izuku would say, tossing her off of Miss Inko would look on it in complete shock that her baby, her child, her only son, had completely forgotten about her. She would just shake her head as tears would start falling off her face once more. "No, you can't be Izuku. You can't be. Izuku would know who I am. Surely. I'm his mother, after all," she would say, as Izuku would only glare on towards her, as he would look towards the way glass before telling All Might to be gone with her, as All Might would walk into the room, picking her up before quickly rushing out so Izuku didn't try toying or pulling anything. So with that happening, we then see Aizawa along with Nezu end up arriving, as Nezu would end up walking into the room with Izuku before studying him intently, as Izuku would just be sitting there calmly, not even trying to attack Nezu. Nezu would be looking on at Izuku, just wondering what was up with him. "Why aren't you attacking me? You did try to kill All Might after all. And you've critically injured him, even after the all-for-one fight, too. He can't even use his quirk anymore." Much like how All Might just couldn't use his quirk after basically the just fight with All For One, All Might right there would actually listen to Sir Night Eye and would give All For One to Mirio, so he wouldn't have to worry about just anything with being just having died or not being able to transfer One For All to anyone. So with that, Nezu would be talking to Izuku, who would just shrug his shoulders. I have no reason to attack you, Nezu. I know you're the principal of UA. I just don't have a point to attack you at all, that's it. If I really wanted to attack you or possibly kill you, I could have done it 5 minutes ago, Izuku would say, as Nezu would only stare on at Izuku, still just intently looking at him, just walking around him, just as if studying him. So, do you mind telling me what your life story is? Oh, that should be quite easy, Izuku would say, however, wouldn't reply with anything else after that. So with that, Izuku would be transferred into an armored car, not after being put on a special new device that would go around Izuku's neck, much like a dog collar. However, it was a cork-canceling collar, so that Izuku could use his hands, and not have to be held up by just the not just have to be held up by the handcuffs. So with that, Izuku would be transferred into the Class 1A dorms. Nezu, after seeing that Izuku didn't attack him, or All Might, or even Inko, his mother, when they walked into the room, so he decided to give it a chance to just put him into Class 1A's dorms, just to try to see if anything would happen, as Nezu wanted to see if he can hopefully try to rehab villains with sort of a new type of just technique that he has found, or just try to rehab villains so that he could just see and show Izuku as an example to the public that villains can be changed, and that they're not all just mindless monsters that kill people for fun. Nezu knew this and wanted to hopefully try to show the public that a rehab system could be in order to try to save some of these villains that Nezu deemed weren't too far off from still being normal civilians. So Nezu would look on towards Izuku. However, Izuku would still just not care, as Nezu's now in the armored car would start asking Izuku questions. So, Izuku, do you mind telling me what happened to those 5 students that got kidnapped at the USJ? Nezu would say, as Izuku would shake his head. Nope, I don't have a clue where I sent them. Oh, so you sent them somewhere? Yes, I did. I sent them to a warehouse, actually. I'll let you find wherever that warehouse is. But by now, they're probably being experimented on already. Nezu would shake his fist in anger, however he would look on towards Izuku. Do you know how much trouble I'm going to be in if I don't find them? Oh yeah, I know the public's going to be quite mad at you for losing 5 students. However, I can't help you with that one. However, I do know some very priceless information. Nezu would look intently at Izuku as if he was about to say something. I know a lot of information about the League of Villains. I know quite a lot of it. Where the location is, all the experiments they do. However, I have no reason to tell you any of it, because you and I have no loyalty towards each other. So, I don't really need to tell you anything, because you could always just backstab me, and I could always just backstab you. So until we find out a trustworthy scenario, or just get trust in each other, I'm not going to say anything to you, Nezu. Izuku would say as Nezu would just shake his head. Fine, you can go ahead and do so, but don't think we're still going to try and hopefully find them. Oh, but what the villains are going to be doing to them? It can be reversed. It will just take a hell of a lot of time, Izuku would say as Nezu would stare on and at Izuku. So, just in case you see any mindless bird monsters with brains out of their heads, just know that that process that makes them into that can be reversed. What? Nezu would say. What are you talking about, Izuku? Nezu would yell along with All Might. I suppose I said too much. But there's something called a Nomu. It's kind of a mindless monster that follows orders blindlessly. I know I was supposed to be one, but I turned out to be sort of a passion project by the doctor. But that doctor was an idiot, and that's why I exist. However, the Nomu things, they can be reversed. However, it takes a long time. A process I have no clue, but I've seen them be reversed before. That's all the information I can tell you. Oh, we're here, Nezu would say, as they would look on to see the UA dorm rooms just all scattered along, as Nezu had decided to build the dorms just before the school year had even started. So with that, Izuku would be walking in, as he would end up being sat on the couch with All Might sitting next to him, as all of the students would be staring, just glaring at Izuku. However, Izuku would just be laughing. Oh, why do you all look so mad? It's not like I somehow was to blame for helping kidnap 5 of your fellow classmates. Izuku would, as all of them would look on in just anger towards Izuku. How dare you do that? Many of them would just think in their head, however, none of them just would have the gut to say it, as Izuku would merely just be smiling at them like he just didn't care that he had a court-canceling collar on him. So Bakugo would end up walking up to Izuku before punching him across the face in anger. However, Izuku would only stare up directly at Bakugo like it didn't even hurt. His shock nullification quirk was being cancelled out by this collar, and yet the punch that Bakugo sent at full force didn't hurt him at all, as Izuku would only be staring up at Bakugo before smiling. Oh, is that all you got, Bakugo? It's a shame you're so weak, Izuku would say before spitting out some blood right at Bakugo, as Bakugo had managed to make one of Izuku's teeth fall out from the direct punch square to where Izuku's jaw, mouth, and sort of cheek was. As the tooth would end up hitting Bakugo square in the eyes, Bakugo would then see the tooth just regenerate out of nowhere, as Izuku would only just be smiling. I suppose you can't cancel my regeneration quirk with this. Or possibly you just canceled out too many quirks with this quirk canceling thing of device on me. I don't think it could cancel around 5 quirks at once. That'd probably be putting too much stress on it. So I suppose it malfunctioned and allowed for my regeneration quirk to still be active. Oh well, Izuku would say, as Bakugo would only glare in anger and would go for a second punch, however it would be blocked by All Might. Not so fast, Bakugo. Calm down. Not right now. You don't want to make him angry. Trust me, All Might would say, as Izuku would only smile back at Bakugo, as Bakugo would be forced to walk back and sit on the opposite couch. This might be quite hard for you, but you're going to have to get used to Izuku being here. He's going to be... how do I say this? He's going to be most likely a permanent member here with Class 1A, as he's going to be joining the UA rehab program that's newly been created. And hopefully he can turn him into a hero and change some of the twisted ideals that he had with spending so much time with All for One. Izuku would only look at just Nezu before just shaking his head. You're gonna have the hell of a hard time trying to twist my mind, Nezu, Izuku would say. However, deep down, all of his ideas and ideals were being twisted, as he just couldn't understand anything. It was like all of his life was a lie, like he was living 2 lives, like he wasn't supposed to be where he was right now. As Nezu would end up putting Izuku into a court-canceling room up at the top of the UA Class 1A dorms, as it would end up being supervised by Aizawa and other heroes 24/7. However, Izuku would go down and sit on the mattress that was the only thing in the room, as he would end up just staring down at his hands in complete confliction. He didn't understand anything. This just doesn't make any sense. It's like my whole life was a lie. Zuko's shaking his head. As he would put one of his hands up to his head, shaking his forehead. Was everything All for One's telling me? Was it all just a lie? Sure, All might be my father, but that green-haired lady, what was her name again? Inko. My mother. This just doesn't make any sense. Izuku would say, shaking his head once again. As this would be happening, as Izuku's minds and thoughts were being twisted, everything All for One was telling him and taught him, it was all just a lie. All for One was lying to him this entire time. And yet he just couldn't understand it. The sudden realization that All for One was lying to him. But yet, All Might never came to save him. His own father never came to save him. Izuku's intelligence quirk would be kicking in, as that was another quirk that just couldn't be cancelled out. It was most likely because they just couldn't find me, but All for One lying to me. I forgot about my own mother. It's just all... It's so confusing, Izuku would say. As Izuku would end up seeing his door be opened, so he would see All Might walk into his room. However, Izuku would get up, standing up. As All Might would see Izuku standing up, as he would get on guard, puffing into his big might form. However, his quirk, he could still barely use it, but it was like he didn't even have the quirk anymore. So Izuku would rush towards All Might. All Might would punch Izuku square in the neck, which just happened to be perfectly placed, breaking the device around him, as Izuku would knock All Might out, as he would end up turning the corner, jumping out of a window, or using a portal to teleport into one of the cities around him, as Izuku would end up just landing on top of a rooftop before just looking around. I guess this city is something, huh? Izuku would say to himself, staring down at everything. The villains, they all lied to me. But this corrupt society, all the examples they showed me, they were real, but they never showed me anything All Might had done. They never showed me any of the good examples of what heroes did. The society's such a corrupt one, isn't it? Zuko would ask himself, as Zuko would stare down on to the roads just below him, just wondering, thinking about how corrupt this society has become. The villains and the heroes, neither sides are right. I guess it's now up to me to figure out how to stop them, huh? Zuko would ask. Having seen his mother had just completely changed Izuku. The emotionless Izuku had completely changed after seeing his mother. And finally realizing who his mother was and who All Might was. He realized what he had done. However, he didn't trust the heroes, and now he didn't trust the League of Villains either. As all of this would be happening, Izuku would end up staring down at the alleyway that was right beneath him, as he would end up seeing Stain, the hero killer, standing directly in there with a hero now in his grasp, about to just injure the hero. However, Izuku would jump down, staring on at Stain, as Stain would ask who Izuku was. For Izuku would shake his head. "That's not the point right now, Stain," Izuku would say, before twisting his arm, knocking out the hero behind him. "Why do you choose to injure and kill all of these heroes?" Izuku would say. "Don't you think you can at least just make it so that you can try to change their ideals at least a little bit? Threaten them? Why do you choose to kill them, or possibly injure them beyond repair? Just taking them away from their families," Zuko would say, questioning on towards Stain. However, Stain would just shake his head. "It doesn't matter right now, Zuko. It doesn't matter," Stain would say, as Stain had had an encounter with Shigaraki, as Shigaraki would ask Stain to bring Izuku back to the League of Villains, just saying that they need to talk with him, and in exchange, Stain would get money so that he could continue on repairing all of his swords and all of that whenever they got broken, when they were fighting one of the just a hero. As Stain would jump on towards Izuku, taking out his sword, he would go to slash Izuku. And that is where I'm gonna leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you all did enjoy part 2 of What If Deku turned into a Nomu. I thank you all for watching. I hope you all did enjoy part 2 of What If Deku turned into a Nomu. And yeah, I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.